And I'm really, really happy to be back as your host. I'm, of course, David Allen Patali. I'm a local writer living and working here in Perth, Bulu. And I'd like to acknowledge, before we begin, the traditional custodians of this land that I'm broadcasting to you tonight from, the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. It's also my great pleasure tonight to have Molly Schmidt for her book, Salt River Road, her debut novel for Fremantle Press. She's our first guest for 2024 for the Libby Book Club for WA. Molly, welcome. How are you tonight?
Hey, Dave, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting stuck into your wonderful debut novel. Before I do, let's just lay a few, not ground rules, let's call them housekeeping. So if you're
Mhm.
joining tonight, everything's live. Anybody can participate. We have a group chat and you can jump in with any comments, any questions that you have for Molly on absolutely anything. We were just having a chat in what we call the green room before. Molly just says, ask me anything. This is an open book session. So, and I'll do my best to weave all of those questions into the chat. And we're just going to have a rollicking good time. Um, this is all thanks to Overdrive Australia and, of course, the State Library for WA. And it's in support of the Libby app. Libby's, of course, the app that you can use to essentially download any book that you like, as long as it's in the public libraries, and it's free. And best of all, anything that's featured in the Libby Book Club for WA, you get first dibs on. There's no holds on it. So, why wouldn't you get Libby? Please download it, use it. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here. But it's my absolute pleasure to hold in my hand Salt River Road. Molly, this was 10 years in the making. Did you ever think this day would come when this book is a physical object? It's a digital object. It's something you can hold in your hands and you can give to people. What's it feel like?
It's really surreal, Dave. I hoped it would come. It's a day that I dreamed of, but I really genuinely, I didn't know. I think that the world of publishing a book and whether it happens is unpredictable and, difficult to predict. I don't know. It's so amazing to not only have it with me, but now see other people, you holding it and to walk past bookshops and see it in the window. And yeah, it still feels very surreal. I don't know whether you got over that feeling or whether you still feel like that when you see your own book. But for me, it's still a weird, beautiful feeling.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think we're meeting you at a sort of an inflection point on this roller coaster that I suppose you're on. Today you were shortlisted for a pretty major award. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so that was the indie debut, so the indie book awards and the debut section. Which yeah, I just feel a little bit like Salt River Road and Rose and Frank have got this sort of momentum of their own. I feel like I'm stepping back and or sitting back, sorry, and kind of watching them take their place in the world, and it's exciting. But I also have this separation from it almost where I forget that I wrote it, and it feels I don't yeah. Again, it's also new to me being a debut, but it's yeah, exciting and as if it's rolling along without me, and I'm just along for the ride. The characters are pushing it all forwards.
That's wonderful, Molly. Well, what I'd like to do is I'll just read the blurb on the back, but then I'll ask you a
Sure,
question. Okay, so
sure.
we're joined tonight by people who I'm not sure if any who's read it, who hasn't, who's halfway through, who's three quarters. So I'll try my best for no spoilers. But the blurb on the back says, in the aftermath of their mother's death, the lives of the five Tetley siblings fall apart. Rose is abandoned by her beloved brother Frank, while their father Eddie is undone by his grief. When Noongar elders Patsy and Herbert encounter Rose marching away from the mess, they take her home in a storm of red gravel dust that stirs up memories Eddie Tetley would rather forget. Rose finds herself welcomed into a home where she has the chance to discover the true power of belonging. With the help of Patsy and Herbert, she will find a way to begin to heal not only her family's pain, but wounds hidden for a generation. Well, that's a very powerful premise for a story, a very powerful summary. What's Salt River Road about, though, in your words? What do you think Salt River Road is trying to communicate to us?
I feel like it's these two narratives that are kind of interwoven. And there's the first one, which is how it began, and the one that's very close to me. And that's the story of two children losing a parent to a terminal illness. And that's something that I know well, and they're, written by my experience and my emotion, but with these beautiful fictional characters. And it's about how they do and don't cope with that, I suppose, and the messy parts. It's the stuff that you don't often hear about that happens behind the closed doors at the hospital, and the way that the kids who are maybe not the main characters in that trauma are feeling and responding, and what that childhood looks like. So there's that sort of grittiness of loss. It's also set in regional WA in the 70s, so there's that real sort of Australian backdrop. So there's that part, and Rose and Frank are the main characters, the two middle siblings, and it's sort of told in their parallel story. But then there's a what I hope becomes the uplifting tangent in the book that is what's healing for Rose and Frank as well, and that's the story of reconciliation, and that's about the Noongar community in the Great Southern, and two special elders in particular who become almost like grandparents to Rose and Frank in a way, and they help them not only connect with the country that they're living on and their farm and the mountains and all of that, but also with their family and with what's going on, and start to see a way through. So sorry, that's a bit of a long rambled answer, but it to me is very sort of two distinct threads.
Something I really enjoyed about your writing, I mean, I've read people's reviews of it, people's other takes on it. It talks a lot about grief. Of course, naturally, it's a book about death and grief and recovery, but it struck me also its empathy. Even just where you're writing in the second person perspective, you feel this, you say, you watch this, you're placing the reader very firmly into this experience. But it instead of it being like having this world thrust upon you, it's you weave this very beautiful spell where you just feel things so strongly as a reader. I was captivated by
that. Oh, thank you.
Is empathy what you were like creating or going for? It's a very awkward question, but it just didn't feel like a sort of, it wasn't just observations of grief is what I'm getting at.
I wonder if what you're feeling there. So yeah, I guess there are sections. So Rose and Frank, throughout the book, they refer to their mum as you. You did this and you did that, and I remember you when you said this. And so I suppose I guess it wasn't directly what I was doing, but it was a way of keeping the mum there in the story, because the reader needs to know who she is and a bit about her, but she's actually not there because she's the physical loss. But yeah, so I suppose it was keeping her there, and because to the kids, she's still very alive. She is there, so she's still the heart of the story. And I hope that by having that you and that impression of the mum, Eleanor, that there's an extra layer of understanding who she was and what she meant.
Tell us about the Tetleys. What kind of family are they?
I refer to what's that?
Get to know them pretty well, but what kind of family are the Tetleys?
So I described them a few times as the troublesome Tetleys. They are dysfunctional. They are not coping, and I think they did cope in a way before Eleanor, the mum, was sick. But look, they're doing it fairly rough. They don't have a lot of money. They're living on a sheep farm that they're pretty much working for their rent on the farm, and they're very close knit. So there's five siblings, ranging from early 20s down to the youngest is 5 years old. And they fracture in the loss, so it becomes just chaos. The sheep aren't being shorn, no one's cooking food, there's only scraps of toast and brown apples in the fridge, and the kids are drinking the dad's beers, and no one's going to school, and it's messy. They're beautiful, and they're all big feelers, and I love them, which I suppose happens when you make them up, but they're dysfunctional for sure.
I love that. Yeah. And was it a challenge to show people in their fullness of their character? That this isn't a glossy representation of people. This feels very real, very honest, very raw.
Yeah, I think Frank is the really raw one. So he's 1 year older than Rose, but they're born on the same day, and they're almost twins, and they have this love-hate kind of situation, sort of sibling relationship. But yeah, Frank was difficult to explore because for me and my process, I think I was a lot more like Rose. I was very anxious and sort of internalized things. And Rose really tries to hold the family together and is really sort of tightly held. Whereas Frank's explosive and, he steals and drinks and runs away. And he's quite awful sometimes. So yeah, he was difficult to explore, but I also feel like I learned a lot about people and grief through writing him because the more that I explored him as a character, the more he showed me that there was always reasons for what was going on and yeah, a big heart behind it all.
I really enjoyed how you we're switching between the characters quite a bit, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's a mirror effect. You understand one action, even to the point where I was reading quite deep in. I'm like, oh, that's why that. Gotcha. Like that was a very interesting way of going. Was that a difficult thing to navigate, or did that just flow quite naturally because of your connection to the characters?
Well, it wasn't Frank's story to start with. It was all Rose. And I couldn't work out why Frank was being so awful to her. And I started writing from Frank's perspective, not planning it to be in the book, actually just as a writer, as part of my own process to figure out what he was doing. And then he became so loud in that writing that it became clear to me that he had a lot to say too. And when you said the mirror effect, Dave, I've spoken to some readers that notice it and some who haven't, but there is poetry throughout the book, and roses are set right where Frank's are set. No, sorry, roses are left and Frank's are right.
Oh,
So they
wow.
actually do mirror each other.
Yeah, I'm just looking now. Yeah, that's cool. Well,
Yeah.
so isn't it great to be with a publisher like Fremantle Press that will back an artistic vision as well? It's an immensely readable book. It's got this engaging story. It's got so much heart, but also you're deploying quite sophisticated literary techniques here. You've got the poetry, the mirror effect. What was that like to have the ambition to put that on the page and then actually see that realized? To have that.
Well, Fremantle Press were amazing to work with. So Georgia Richter, who was the editor that I worked with, it was her idea doing the mirroring thing with the poetry. Because it was tricky. I'm not going to lie. I think structure for me isn't my strong point, and because there were so many different things happening, Georgia was the one that sort of came in and was like, right, yeah, okay, but we need to sort this out structurally. And there was a point where she thought, say, only one of the characters could have the poems, because I guess for people who haven't read it, the poems come in when there's something difficult maybe happening, or when there's a really confronting scene. It's still in the narrative, but the writing breaks away and it becomes, I wonder if I don't know how easy it is to see, but it breaks into poetry like that. So yeah, Georgia at one point thought it might be confusing to have both the characters do that. But it was an amazing process working with them, because we just kept chipping away till we both agreed. And it was Georgia who suddenly went, they're like twins, they'll mirror each other. So yeah, I don't know if you, did you enjoy the process, Dave, of the editing and refining it?
I did, and just so people know, my book Locust Summer was edited by Georgia Richter as well. So,
Yeah, I thought so.
Molly, you and I share a journalism background, so I enjoyed it because I'm used to being, well, not shouted at, but like journalism editing is pretty ruthless and aggressive, whereas the process of being edited by Georgia Richter at Fremantle Press artistically was incredibly respectful and supportive, and it just brought the best out of me. So it was
Totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Molly, we've got our first question in the comments, which is actually a fun one. So
Okay.
it's from Christina. She says, "Can you tell us more about how you developed the playlist that goes along with the book? I finished the book in a day while
Oh,
enjoying the music, which is great because classic tracks. I think that it's listed at the back here. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. Thanks, Christina. So the music, as I mentioned before, so I guess my emotional connection to the story was that I lost my dad to terminal cancer as a kid. And the music is actually a bit of an ode to him because I inherited his record collection and I just love his music. It's always been a way of connecting with him. And I had automatically included a lot of references to that music. And it wasn't till final edit time that my mum was working through it with me, kind of I was in that panic of having to get it done real quick. And she was there and she started asking me all these really specific questions about the music. And I was feeling quite frustrated because I was really stressed and I couldn't work out why it was so important. But what my mum was doing was actually writing that playlist that's at the back of the book. She was going through and pulling out all the song references. So on your mum, it was a great idea. But yeah, and it kind of just became part of the Tetley family that while there's so much going on, they also just love rock and roll music, and it gave that sort of setting and that sound that I could really ground into about who they are, which was fun.
Absolutely. You just brought to mind, I was there when you won the TAG Hungerford. And I remember your family was all there up the back. This rambunctious, joyful family. One, I think I went half deaf from the yelling and the screaming. It was wonderful. It's great to have support like that from your family, Molly. Is it? I'm not going to ask, is it based on your family or anything like that? Of course, we all write what we know, but is it nice being part of a rambunctious family like that and then getting to write about another family?
Yeah, well, and I guess in some ways I wrote what I know, but some ways I didn't because I don't have any siblings. So this is sort of the experience that I didn't have in some ways, where, Rose and Frank have this big, troublesome Tetley family. Whereas for me, that experience looked like sort of just me and mum. So, yeah, it's been really beautiful, the process of the book coming out, having extended family step back in board. And I think it's been really healing for all of us too, to come together, which is really beautiful.
And you devoted the book to your dad as well. Your mother, Jenny Schmidt, and your father, Gavin. Was that a pretty, I don't know, like it's a great honor to dedicate a book to someone. Was that a good moment to be able to do that?
Yeah, definitely. I actually I got my first physical proof copy of the book on the day before Mother's Day. And so that was so exciting because mum didn't know that it was dedicated to her as well. So I got to show her. I think I ended up giving her that copy so that it was like, yeah, it was so special just to be able to do that. And I also, it's sort of a funny thing that I did, but I also dedicated it to myself, to little Molly, which was really special too. Yeah, I'm not even sure if I can explain all of that, but it was little me that went through that loss, and it was quite healing to be able to say, all right, this is for you, we did it, moving on. Yeah.
I suppose it's a very large question, but what did you learn in writing the book over the process, over all of the years of thinking about it, of doing it, and then you get to the end? I mean, you're a different person at the end of this process from what you were at the beginning. And so what was the praxis for you, the reason for doing everything?
It was also twofold because I guess there was that part of me that wrote the healing, exploring my own grief at the beginning. And I think that was the initial point for me, was it was just a safe place to explore what I was feeling. But the book didn't grow from that for a really long time. It was just sort of this place that I would pick up my pen and explore what Rose and Frank were doing, and if they were okay. And most of the time they weren't okay. And that was sort of it. So that sort of hit a bit of a dead end. And it wasn't until bringing in that extra layer of the reconciliation and exploring this whole other narrative that it became something else. And that was special because that became, when you say, what did I learn from it? It was healing for me in the same way that it was healing for Rose and Frank, meeting these elders that they meet in the book. I was consulting with elders while I wrote that, and that connection for me was incredibly healing. So it's been such a multi-layered, sort of multifaceted thing, but a lot about grief and overcoming it, and connection to country and reconciliation, and also just the amazing, Noongar elders that we're really lucky to still have around to talk to and learn from.
Absolutely. Well, Molly, that's an enormous conversation that I'd really love to have. I just want to have one question here from Marlish, I think it is. There is much to love about this book. She says the experience of grief from different perspectives feels incredibly real. How did you manage to really explore Frank, given your comment about being more like Rose yourself? It sounds like you looked outward and you really dove into these characters through the process.
Yeah, and I think it's funny in life. I feel like you often get drawn to people that have had similar experiences. But I grew up with a friend who had lost his mum to cancer. And I think I saw that difference in how we were coping then, that we were feeling a lot of the same things for the same reasons, but we were coping completely differently. And yeah, I'm not sure if that was a gendered thing or an age thing. He was a little bit older than me as well. Same with Rose and Frank. But I also think it's just people. We all respond different ways. But yeah, I did kind of get to see parts of Frank's character played out. And then I think on the flip side, I kind of took Frank's character to the extreme of all the places that I didn't let myself go, was thinking, how chaotic did I actually feel? I wonder what that would have looked like. So yeah, he was just a bit of an exploration on what that can look like.
I suppose then, is this what you love about literature? What do you think is, to you, what's the central power of writing, of expressing these very powerful emotions, or exploring these difficult subjects and difficult empathies that we can have? What does literature do for you?
That's an awesome question. I think it's blown my mind how much I guess you experience it when you're writing characters, but also when you're reading a book. It just amazes me how much we can learn from stories that are made up, but because they are reflections of what we're all going through and feeling. And yeah, I think that is what literature is to me. It's having those other perspectives, it's sharing your perspective. And while, yeah, it may be fiction, it's also so incredibly real at the same time.
Would you share some of Salt River Road with us here?
Sure. I'll read you to start with. I guess to get a taste of the poetry, there's a poem I quite often read from Rose's perspective. The beginning is very sad. I always do preface that I promise it gets a bit happier as the book goes along. But so this is Rose when she's losing her mother. The morning before you left, I cooked eggs in the kitchen with lemon oil, the way you liked. I thought the smell of buttered toast might make you stay. You couldn't eat it, and neither could I, so it sat on your dresser for a while until the smell made us sick, and Dad threw it off the veranda to the chooks. I sat beside you, gripping your hand, my nails making crescent moons in your paper skin. I tried to hold your eyes in mine, but you drifted, already leaving, beside me. Outside, the boys kicked the soccer ball against the wall. It thudded over and over again, an angry little denial that today was any different. They wanted you to come, to tell them to stop, to say lunch was ready. But instead, after an hour, Dad came and screamed at them, and Albie cried, so then Dad cried too. And they all came and piled on the bed, sweaty and smelling of grass and desperation. You stroked Albie's forehead with your eyes closed. My beautiful boys, you murmured, your hands searching for Dad's face and wiping the tears you found there. My beautiful Rose. I didn't want you to touch me in case it was goodbye, and yet I couldn't let go of your hand. Outside, the chickens ate the lemon eggs. Strange how they didn't recognize them as their own. Poor little Rose.
Just, I really appreciate also. It has such propulsive quality. The poems they're very vivid, prose like, but also I like that they're not interruptions to the story, but it's like, oh, here's something else. It's like, and then it allows you to reflect back and then look forward. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I tried to write some of those scenes not in poetry and I couldn't. So it was something I ended up having to lean into, which was interesting.
Have you written much poetry before, or is this was it a something that you wanted to challenge yourself to do?
No, it was kind of the other way around. I think I more naturally write poetry and I didn't think I would ever write a book. So
Right. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, quite the opposite.
This is a whole other week to go down. So what? How long have you been? How long had you been writing poetry for? Before you tackled a prose novel.
I think poetry is, I journal a lot, and poetry is sort of more how I naturally, I guess, write and reflect and explore. And I did, creative writing through uni and that sort of thing. And whenever we were doing projects where you choose what your medium was, mine was always poetry. So yeah, this is the only book that I'd ever, considered doing. But Rose and Frank just had so much to say that it kind of had to keep going, which was interesting. But perhaps why structure is not my strong point also.
Cool. So poetry is one line after another, and novels are one word after another, or one paragraph after another. So it's
Yeah, I guess so.
very different thinking behind it, I suppose. Yeah. Oh well, I just wanted to jump into the chat again. We've got they're coming thick and fast now. Everyone's warmed up. This is great. So, Bill has a lovely comment, and I just want to acknowledge, this book is about grief and death, and we all come to it with our different experiences and relations. And just want to acknowledge that, it's a book that affected me deeply, and I think it's affected a lot of people who are reading it deeply. So, Bill says, I think you've explained the dedication of the book to your mum, late dad, and former self very well. I'm pleased it contributed to your healing. It's hard to grieve as a child, and when you lose a parent as a child, I think from my experience, you revisit the grief throughout your life and experience it differently at different ages. It's a great comment, because do you think that sort of touches on some of the themes here in Salt River Road, and particularly that the experiences of Rose and Frank, that they are dealing with something that's so immediate, but also it's touching them at different points as we move through the narrative?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Bill. That is a really heartfelt point. And yeah, I can hear that you relate to the story in some ways very deeply. Yeah, I'm a good example of that, in that I lost dad when I was 10, but then I first started writing about the experience when I was a teenager. And then it's been, 15 years now since I first did that it's come back so many times. And this is just one form, I guess, of exploring the loss that has come up. Yeah, really true that it's cyclical, I suppose, and sort of random. And I guess there's points in your life when that parent becomes really significant again, when they maybe would have particularly been there. And for me, the book coming out has been one of them, because I'm like, wow, imagine if dad could be here to see this, but also that wouldn't make sense because it's all because of my experience of losing him. So yeah, it's a very complex but beautiful and hard journey.
And expressed beautifully in your writing. I wanted to pull a book out from my bookshelf here. So this is Taboo by Kim Scott.
Yeah.
And Kim Scott's on one of Western Australia's foremost writers. He's on your back cover with a blurb. He was also your supervisor at university. Yeah. Taboo is an extraordinary book in that it's about, maybe perhaps if people don't know it, it's about there's a fictional town in the Great Southern where a massacre has taken place, First Nations massacre, and it's about an attempt at reconciliation by the locals. And what I really enjoyed about this book was that from the Indigenous perspective, they were saying there's nothing to fear. We just want to talk. There's nothing to fear. Reconciliation is about having the chat. What was your experience like of as a writer going with your creative process and your intention to elders and saying, I want to write about Indigenous people? What was the first step for you in that journey?
Kim was instrumental in that because, he's from Albany, as I am too. And so the elders that I was wanting to consult with in that area were people that he knows and knows really well. So the first step was that he helped me figure out kind of almost geographically and also spreading across all the different families, how we could get a good mix of different families from the area and who those elders would be and who would be culturally correct for me to go to. And then I didn't go to them and say, I want to write about you. I came to them much more with a question because I was really unsure of my place and if I should include them in my book at all. I just knew that if they wanted me to, then I wanted to. And if they didn't want me to, then I wanted to know that I'd asked and that I had checked. Because I just felt uncomfortable that it was set on their country and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, I suppose. And so I initially just said that I was writing a book set in the Great Southern. Should I include their people? And if so, could we explore what that would look like? And yeah, in this case, and I think it's important because I think this would be different depending on what language group or family group you're asking and where. But for this particular thing, all these elders really wanted a local book to reference them and talk about their stories. So it was a slow process. It ended up being over 2 years of back and forth with them and building a relationship with them firstly. But they were hugely instrumental in shaping the extent of what they wanted included and how they wanted those stories to come across. So it was fascinating. I was really lucky to form those relationships.
Did you have any fears as an artist about letting go, perhaps, of the control of your project, or was that was your intention from the start?
Definitely. Fear more so was offending the people that I was actually trying to I don't know, help is not the right word, but extend and include. And they were really aware, I guess because we got to know each other well. It was 5 elders that I worked with, and I worked with them all individually, so that we all had a chance to connect and for them to share their honest thoughts. And each of them, I think, understood that this is Rose and Frank's story. I'm not stepping into the Noongar characters as a protagonist, but Rose and Frank know Noongar people, and so we wanted to talk about those experiences. So they were never trying to change the story of Rose and Frank, but they were kind of informing me about what those connections that Rose and Frank had with the elders might actually have been like, and also some of the stories that they hoped could come across about their own families from the region and stuff. So yeah, it was definitely scary, but more because I wanted to get it right for my sake in trying to help and serve them.
And you had a wonderful moment launching the book where the elders came. Can you tell us about your launch? It was in Albany, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we did the Fremantle Press launch. We did that in Fremantle, but for me, it was really important beforehand. We had a launch on country, in Albany, in the town hall, which is mentioned in the book too. And yeah, the elders came and were present, which was just so special. That was the moment for me in all of this process that I had dreamed of and had wondered what it would feel like. And for me, it was just integral that they were there. And yeah, Uncle Lester, one of the elders that I've become really close with, I speak to him a couple of times a week still. He's become like a grandfather figure for me. He plays in a country band, and so his band played covers of the songs that are in the book, which was just so gorgeous. Yeah, very special.
Molly, there's a lot of writers who are joining us tonight and who are connecting with your book, and of course, coming to events that you're talking about your process in. What do you hope writers or maybe artists in general, or even the public readers, take away from your experience in opening yourself up to this inclusion, this collaboration, this collaboration is probably not even, I don't know, how would you actually describe the relationship actually?
I think I got to really experience what it's like to work with elders because they became, my elders. So it was running things by them and it was working with respect and getting their permission for things that culturally I needed it for. Like, do I name this space or do we not because it's sacred? And yeah, and it was a consultation. and a collaboration. But yeah, I think more than that, it was sort of this beautiful experience of working with elders. What did you ask before that bit? It was a double-barreled question.
What do you hope people take away from it? Say maybe art. Let's just say artists and readers.
Yeah, that's right. I think that you can ask those questions. I think that that people are scared often to ask the questions that are needed to be asked to have that relationship even be formed in the first place. And I think in a lot of ways that fear is valid. I was really scared because it matters. So I think that's fair, but I think we have to work out how to push through that and try. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from it was that I genuinely didn't have an agenda, in that if the elders said to me, we don't want you to write about our people, I wasn't going to. I was doing an honest thesis on the whole thing, so I was going to write about why they said no. But yeah, it was just the intention, I suppose, that I really genuinely wanted to be doing something they were happy with. And I think if that's what writers and artists are going in with, you can't really go wrong, because if you get told, no, I'm busy and I don't want to be part of it, then you can take that as face value and they don't want to be part of it. Or if they do, you can explore what that looks like. But I think it's just about actually asking the questions.
And you're now continuing this journey. I understand you've got a research opportunity to keep going in what you're doing here. Can you tell us a bit about that? What would be next?
Yeah. Yeah, so really exciting. I'm actually about to start a PhD project with Curtin Uni and also through the Forest Foundation, which is exciting. And it's going to be a biography project looking at Uncle Lester, so the elder I mentioned before, and Auntie Avril, looking at their stories, because throughout the process of consulting with them, it came up a lot that they have true stories that, because they're so busy, both of them are still, in their 80s, are still huge parts of the Great Southern community as elders. And so they don't have time to write their own story, and it's not recorded anywhere. Snippets of it are, but there's no cohesive story of these two elders whose families were really, really influential in shaping that region as we know it. So yeah, I'm really excited and really honored that they've asked me to help them document their stories. So that's next.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that part of your process with us. I think it's really fascinating, and it comes through with such authenticity on the page, and I think that's really probably where you want it to count, isn't it? You want it to have a great effect on the writing. So I'll just say, Ebony in the chat says, "I love the way you've created these characters, Molly," and here to that. Auntie Patsy is perfect. Oh. Frank is spot on. Let's have a chat about Auntie Patsy. What was to you, how does she sit in your heart? You were saying, with Rose and Frank, these are characters that you got to know quite well. What about Auntie Patsy?
Auntie Patsy, I feel, embodies the fierceness and also the beautiful softness at the same time that I experienced working with the women, the female elders that I worked with, because so there was Auntie Avril Dean and Auntie Carol Pedersen, the two women that I worked with, and they just blew me away. They were just so resilient and so loving and kind, but at the same time took absolutely no crap. And I think that, they're both very different women in terms of their characters, but that trait was really strong in both of them. And so Patsy just embodied that. She kind of just took that to life on the page of, she loves Rose and she loves Frank and she loves her husband Herbert, but she also knows exactly what she wants and she's going to get it done. So yeah, she was very real to me. She didn't really take any sorting out. She was just Patsy.
Nice. Also, Kelly chimes in on that as well. I love the relationship between Patsy and Eleanor. The Noongar and Western acknowledgement is so enlightening and fascinating to read. I think it's something we've quite encountered before on the page. We've certainly had plenty of First Nations characters, but none who are the inception didn't come like this.
Yeah, well, I suppose, conscious you said not with spoilers, but I guess, yeah, Eleanor and Patsy have this special relationship where they're exploring the bush and the place they live in their own ways. And, Yeah, it is. I suppose that was also a bit of a parallel of what I was exploring by writing while working with the Noongar community as well. It's all the different ways that this collaboration and working together can come to be. Mm.
I know. I must say this is a bit of a full circle moment for me because one of my first interviews when my book came out was with you at the ABC, which I was very stoked to have. So it's great to have you on. But segueing very neatly into that, Jordana Jordanovska asks, "How did you decide on the title Salt River Road?" Because I remember when I met you at the ABC, this book had a very different title.
Yeah, it is such a full circle moment as well, I want to say. Absolutely. And I, at the time that I interviewed you, none of this was happening for me. So I remember speaking to you, I think it was all still in draft form. And I was sort of like, oh, I don't know if this is ever going to happen. So excited for you. So yeah, it is exciting.
So
Um,
years
it
ago,
was called, what's that? Sorry.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think. So yeah, it's quick work, Molly. That's very good.
Yeah, it's been a wild few years. It was called boat dancing back then because the Tetley kids, like I said, are troublesome. And there's a couple of scenes where they actually party on other people's boats. So they commandeer boats from the docks in Albany. And that had been a really big part of the book before the parallel narrative of the cultural sort of story came in. Salt River Road was actually the title that I submitted it under for the Hungerford, and it was just more of a working title, which I didn't plan on using, but is important because Patsy and Rose drive along Salt River Road, and it's a real road that I've driven along with the elders too in the Great Southern, and it's the backdrop, what's that?
I read on weather reports sometimes. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. You see the whole backdrop of the Stirling Ranges, so the mountains, as you drive along it. So it's incredibly stunning to drive along. And yeah, the elders all really loved. So Freo Press jumped on that they much preferred Salt River Road. And then the elders all did too, because they felt it really grounded the story in that country. So yeah, it sort of chose itself, but having their backing from all of them was huge. It's like, okay, this is what this story is supposed to be called, which was really nice.
Let's talk about the landscape. And the Great Southern is stunning. It's a place where you feel the ancient quality of the land. What drew you to write about the Great Southern in the way that you did?
I suppose it was my backdrop, growing up there. And it has this sort of sacred quality to me because that's where I was when I had my early childhood with my dad. So it's got this significance to me that's really powerful. Plus, then going down and meeting the elders and having the privilege of going on country with them and exploring these places that I'd grown up and experienced as a kid, but through their lens and hearing ancient stories about it. And I remember going into the Stirling Ranges with Uncle Ezard. So he's a Goreng elder from that area, more sort of Noangarup way. And I think that the country and the place almost became a character of its own in the book because it was so important to the characters and also to me while I was writing. Yeah, it's also just such a beautiful place.
Do you visit the Great Southern often?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually going down this weekend to see the elders, so I can't wait. It's I know that as a non-Indigenous person, the connection that I feel to country must be just a grain of sand to what they feel, but I'd certainly feel keen to be there when I haven't been there for a while, I really miss it.
What's your favorite part of the Great Southern? Is it that it's got mountains and hills, or is it the cold? Is it the contrasts, the colors?
I think it's the wildness, the mountains, but then also the ocean, and being able the bush in between, being able to be deep in the bush and then up a mountain and in the ocean, and the way that the community is spread through that, so that going places you're going to be going through stunning countryside on the way.
Molly, I just wanted to read you a line from your very first page,
Okay.
which hooked me, which is great. So, this is the part no one considers when the life has ended, but the chaos continues. Just love the neatness and the symmetry of that. But the part no one considers, when life has ended but the chaos continues. That's the theme of the book in one go, and then from there it just grows.
Yeah, that's true. That could have been the blurb. Hey, just that. um, yeah, it's true, I suppose, because that's how I felt as well in the experience, was that it is the part that no one considers. You talk a lot about the lead up to a death, I think, and the person that you'll lose in the death, but I don't think you really talk about, because it's uncomfortable and, you know, rightly so in a lot of settings, but we don't often talk about, oh, and what actually happened and what did it actually look like and what did that scene feel like, smell like, sound like. I mean, it's awful. There's a reason that we don't do that. But I also think there's a reason that sometimes in art and books we have to explore those uncomfortable settings.
Yeah, and so and go there. Life is for the living. That's what in funeral scenes. It's to honor the person, yes, but also everyone who is still there has to continue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's what I was feeling, was this poor Tetley family. They're still feeling a lot. Let's go and take a look at what's happening for them in this moment.
Molly, what was winning the TAG Hungerford like? That's a huge question, but but it was wonderful to see the shortlisting. But then on the night for Salt River Road to be read out, how did that change things for you? Apart from being published, but did it affirm you? Did it sort of?
Yeah, it changed everything. I mean, it's funny that you were there and you got to hear those. I still remember the sound that my granddad made from the back. So yeah, there were so many layers. Yeah, there were so many layers to it for me. I think because there's the personal trauma that's interwoven with it. So there was this enormous feeling of, oh my God, I can do something with this now. It can be bigger than me now, and that was big. But yeah, I was talking about this with Georgia Richter the other day, that I think the Hungerford. I know that for readers, it's about, especially with a debut author, that, oh, there's a sticker on this that means I might like it. You know, that you can lean into it when you don't know the name and you can trust it. But I think it was bigger than that for me personally, because I had spent so much time writing this book that I didn't know if it would ever go anywhere. That for me, it was that affirmation that I could believe in my writing, which, yeah, I don't know if I'd ever truly felt that, because it was so personal. And I really believed in the work, that I had kind of, yeah, never considered if it would or wouldn't be a book. So it was a hugely affirming moment to all at once be like, wow, it's going to be a book really quickly, because it all happens within a year from the moment. So it was pretty surreal.
And Molly, I know you've got a further research project and a biography project, but are you writing any other fiction, any other poetry? Is there anything else bubbling away?
No, so it's funny. I think Rose and Frank are sort of still a bit loud at the moment. And I don't think it's because there's another book in them, but I think it was just so big for so long that I haven't quite had the brain space to sort of be with other characters or form other characters yet. And in that sense, it's been really nice to know that I can work with the elders with their real stories, and put that part of me that loves storytelling, but use it in a different way, because they've got these real stories that they want to tell. Yeah, I still journal and have been doing a lot of journaling about how crazy the whole experience has been. But yeah.
Is it also, you work at the ABC, that storytelling is very, very much a part of who you are, but the ABCs are very much a part of the community. It's community storytelling, it's connecting. Has the work you've done in Salt River Road influenced the way you approach the work you do for the ABC, the storytelling or the interactions you have?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also vice versa, having the journalism background was originally why I wanted to work with the elders in the first place, because I'd been lucky enough to cover some stories about, Whadjuk Noongar people in Perth, and realize the stories that were not being told, or that we have such a wealth of to discover. So yeah, for me, it's all sort of gone hand in hand, and that ability or the desire, I suppose, more to look at the voices that maybe we aren't hearing as much and connecting with them. And yeah, I don't know. For me, it's definitely the storytelling, whatever form that's in, whether it's a book or at the moment I'm working in radio, which is so different but also so similar. Yeah, people are very interesting, and it's nice to connect.
Thank you. Now, this is a very large question, but what was the book that first made you realize there's a power in storytelling? There's something else here. There's a kind of magic here. Was it a book? Yeah, any moment in particular?
I don't even know if it would be a particular book, but I know Mum always read to me, and that was something that, particularly when there was so much going on, it was books that we would turn to together, even in times when it was like maybe I hadn't done my, when we were having our own dysfunction that the Tetleys are facing, maybe I hadn't done my homework and maybe we hadn't cooked dinner yet and, there were things to do. But if we were struggling, we would read. And I think that was maybe where that came from for me, was realizing how powerful it can be to pick up a story and fall into it. And then I think I've got too many that I love to work out which one it would be. But I think, yeah, perhaps more that experience of falling into a story in a time of need, which is a really special thing that we can do.
Well, Molly says, Molly, thank you for your book and for sharing so much tonight. Not done yet. We've got 9 more minutes. Come on. But but no, it's a real pleasure, Molly, just to hear your process, but also the story behind the story, and also diving into the characters so much. It's a real pleasure. What sort of connections have you been able to have with readers? And this is kind of the best part, isn't it? That people are reading your book.
That's been amazing. That's been the stuff that I guess I wasn't prepared for, but has been so fulfilling in this whole other way. I was at the Mandurah Writers Festival on Friday last week, and there was a woman in the front row who cried quite a lot. And it was sort of this beautiful connection, because in among that, she was almost sort of laughing at herself and smiling at me apologetically, because she didn't want to be crying in that moment. But I felt such a, connection to her, because we didn't have to exchange any words, but I knew that for whatever reason, she'd been through something that the Tetleys have been through. And afterwards, she, bought the book and came and said hello. And we didn't talk about her story. I don't think she wanted to, but we didn't need to. And that sort of thing has been really, really special. And I think it is important to me, maybe in a way that readers don't see too, in that I think readers feel the benefit of seeing their stories told, but then I see the benefit of having this story be seen. So it's incredibly healing for me as well, which is super special.
Well, I know we've got a few writers in the chat tonight and listening in. What would be something that you would like to pass on from your experience? What would be your advice or key insight that you would share as an encouragement?
Or
a discouragement?
I think. What's that? A discouragement? No, none of them. I think that it's okay for it to take time, and okay for you to feel like it's not the driving force of what you're doing all the time, because it definitely hasn't been for me. And there were times when I found that so stressful. But yeah, looking back, I was always doing the best I could with the means I had. And not everyone has the opportunity to write full time or to dedicate all of their time or even all of their spare time to it. And I didn't. This was, scraps of time here and there, and sometimes working full time and not touching the book for even a year. So I think maybe having the just the trust, trying not to panic, that because panic doesn't help either. Then you just feel guilty that you're not writing it, and it doesn't go well when you sit down to write it anyway. And I think that for me, letting it kind of go at times has been really powerful, because when I've returned to it, I've come with whole new perspectives, and that's what's actually made it work in the long run. So yeah, weirdly, I'd say don't be afraid to let it go sometimes, just for a little bit.
Very refreshing to hear Because a lot of writing advice tends to be quite American in that, you must write every day and 500 words or you're a loser, and then you got to do 600 push-ups at the end. It's like, whoa, okay, like this is an
Yeah.
artistic process rather than an engineering project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know the other thing, Dave, would be butcher's paper, which was something that we also shared.
You want
We
to tell
had
that?
you are okay. Do you want to tell it?
It's yours. It's yours.
Okay. Dave and I had the pleasure of sharing the same cabin at different times up at the Catherine Susanna Pritchard Writers Centre, so a beautiful writers centre in the hills. And I had worked there. It was the first time I'd ever had just this week where all I was doing was working on the book, and it was pretty early on. I hadn't started my consultation with the elders. I was just starting to really lean into taking it seriously. And as soon as I walked into the room, I was completely unaware of, I just couldn't work out what on earth to do, and how to work out my thoughts. And the only thing that made sense to me was to drive immediately back down the hill to Officeworks and buy reams of butcher's paper, which is what I ended up doing for pretty much that whole week. I had butcher's paper all over the walls and I was working out, who the characters were and all of this stuff. And I left it there with a note because there was too much butcher's paper, left it there with a note. And I think it was months later that Dave happened to be in that same cabin and found the butcher's paper.
And I had the exact same urgent need to just, because there's a whiteboard there, but I mess
Not
with
big
it.
enough.
It wasn't big enough. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to write standing up. So yeah, when I saw your note and there was the butcher's paper, it was like, oh, thank God. Someone with a similar pain. All right. No, and that helped me out of a pinch because I needed to get a lot of things out of my head and actually see it. Instead of it having it on a screen or in a note, just to see it in large physical writing. Yeah.
Oh, completely.
Out of my, yeah, which was great. So thank you for the butcher's paper. I think I've still got it somewhere, actually. So.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, Molly, we're getting short for time, but I'd just like to read a really lovely couple of comments here. So Molly, of course, says, thank you for your book and for sharing so much tonight. And Bill also says, Molly, your book is a contribution to the exploration of childhood loss and grief. Congratulations and thanks. This is the good part of this whole process, isn't it? It's the sharing and seeing your book become something that you probably didn't expect it to become. Like it becomes other people's.
Absolutely. And I love that people can own it and hold it and it be theirs and whatever they need it to be. It's kind of get the part where you get to release it and just see what happens, which is beautiful.
Emily, I kind of wanted to save the best for last, but the cover. My gosh, the cover. Can you tell us about the cover, please? How did it come to be?
So this is the painting that the cover is based on. I don't know how the recording is. But yeah, this is it. It's called Kwandongs. And so it's a painting by a Noongar elder from Albany. Her name's Auntie Glenda Williams. And I met her just by chance because Uncle Lester and I were doing some work together and he was helping facilitate a painting group that she was at. And I saw the painting sometime last year. And I loved it, and it wasn't finished. And actually, Auntie Glenda's got that fierceness of Patsy in the book too, because she was quite protective that I shouldn't be looking at it because it wasn't done yet. And yeah, quite fiercely proud of what she was painting, but also quite shy. And I asked her if I could take a photo of it, and she sort of reluctantly said, "Oh yeah, go on." And it was months later that Frio Press asked if I had any ideas for the cover, and I said just that I loved this painting. And we tracked Glenda down, and she was kind of really disbelieving to start with that we were for real, that we wanted to use her painting. But yeah, we formed a really lovely relationship with Glenda. And I didn't know that these were Kwandongs and that they actually grow on Salt River Road. So that was a really special kind of extra layer. And yeah, I ended up buying the painting from her. The painting became on the book. And Glenda's painting commissions now, which is really exciting, which she wasn't doing before. So yeah, it's been really beautiful.
Well, Molly, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Julian says, thank you, Molly, and thanks always, David. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Next event is 15th of Feb. You can attend in person at the State Library as well as our usual Zoom event. I'm actually going to be talking to Laurie Steed about his beautiful
Wow.
dad, and it's going to be in person. It's the first in-person one we're doing. It's also going to be on Zoom, but you can come to the State Library and join us in person if you like as well. But Molly, thank you for joining me online tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. Your book Salt River Road is absolutely sublime. Congratulations on your shortlisting and good luck for the debut award as well. Salt River Road is available from Fremantle Press, all good bookstores, audio, also through Libby, the app. So, and on Overdrive Australia. So thank you very much for your time tonight, Molly. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the support.
And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's really great to have you as part of this community. And we're going to have a great 2024 with lots of fantastic books to come. Thank you and good night. See you, everybody.